I used to think marriages fall apart in one dramatic moment, like a plate shattering on tile, but mine didn't. Mine softened, thinned, leaked. It happened so slowly that I only noticed the emptiness when I realized I kept avoiding my own home. My name is Sana, I am 32, and I have been married to Irfan for 6 years. We share a mortgage, a car loan, and 2 different languages when we speak. His is practical, transactional, essential. Mine is emotional, metaphorical, longing. Our conversations started to sound like receipts instead of heartbeat to heartbeat. I kept telling myself every couple becomes dull, but deep inside I mourned a version of us that never got to live long enough. 2 months ago, my company hired a consultant for our research division. His name was Mikhail. He was married too. He introduced himself with an ordinary smile, not flirtatious, not hungry, not suggestive. But his attention had a softness to it that made me feel seen, like he wasn't trying to measure me or categorize me. He asked me questions that had nothing to do with productivity. He asked what I read, what I wanted to do in 10 years, what I feared the most. Nobody had asked me those things since university. Not even my husband. The first conflict between right and wrong didn't start because something happened. It started because something woke up. I suddenly remembered how it felt to be wanted intellectually. I remembered how I used to speak in long sentences, how my mind was capable of nuance and philosophy. With Irfan, I only talk in short sentences now. What's for dinner? When will you be home? Don't forget the electricity bill. Mikhail asked me what I thought about the difference between desire and loyalty. Irfan asked me where the car keys were. But I told myself not to interpret anything. Not every connection is a threat. Not every man is temptation. I wasn't looking for someone else. I just wanted someone to remind me who I used to be. And it stayed innocent for the first 2 weeks. Conversations, shared lunches in groups, emails that were strictly work. Except for one thing, my heart reacted, and that reaction terrified me more than if he had touched me. The central conflict began the day Irfan yelled at me over the gas bill. He wasn't cruel. He was frustrated, but I realized it. I was afraid of my own husband's voice. Not because he would hit me, but because he had stopped being gentle. He had stopped choosing softness. And in that moment I understood, marriages can die without any crime committed. That evening, lying next to Irfan's sleeping body, I replayed Mikhail's sentence from the office cafeteria. You look like someone who lost something important. And you're still pretending you haven't noticed. That was the moment I accepted the truth I had been trying to bury. My marriage wasn't broken. It was abandoned. The second shift happened quietly, inside ordinary circumstances. It wasn't a secret meetup or some forbidden night. It was a Tuesday. The office air conditioner was too cold. I forgot my shawl. Mikhail noticed before I even said anything. He stood up, walked to the cabinet behind his desk, and handed me his own blazer without making a show of it. He didn't hover his hands near my shoulders. He didn't prolong the moment. It was respectful, but it was also dangerous, because that type of respect felt like affection. I wore that blazer for exactly 40 minutes. Yet I remember how safe I felt the entire time it rested over me. After that day, I started watching myself more than I watched him. I watched how my stomach tightened when he walked into the room. I watched how I tried not to smile too eagerly when he greeted me. I watched how I forced myself to look away from his wedding ring, because I didn't want to interpret its presence as a lock or a barrier. I wanted to believe we were just 2 intelligent adults who accidentally enjoyed the same wavelength. I was terrified of labeling it anything more. Things deepened without any physical contact. It started with small confidences. He admitted he and his wife barely speak unless they are discussing logistics. I admitted the same about Irfan. He said he feels more like a roommate than a partner. I admitted that I sleep better on the couch sometimes because the bed feels too tense beside my husband. We swapped these truths like we were exchanging contraband. Every confession was both relief and guilt stitched together. The problem wasn't that Mikhail did or said something explicitly romantic. The problem was how he listened. His listening created a safe land where I could place my vulnerabilities without them being mocked or minimized. I told him about the version of myself that used to paint watercolors. He asked me what colors I used. Irfan always told me painting was a waste of time. Mikhail told me it was the most natural way humans learn how to process the world. Irfan told me to delete my old art account. Mikhail told me to start posting again anonymously just so my soul could breathe. I didn't do anything with Mikhail. I didn't touch him, didn't flirt, didn't attempt any maneuver. But thoughts are not harmless. Not when they repeat, not when they provide comfort that marriage should provide. And one evening, while washing dishes and listening to Irfan shouting at his younger brother on the phone, I realized I looked forward to the next morning only because I would see Mikhail again. I realized anticipation itself had become the emotional affair. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and told myself I was loyal. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't crossed any physical line. But then a more honest voice whispered back, betrayal doesn't start in bedsheets. Betrayal starts in the heart. And my heart had already picked a different home. The day the emotional boundary finally snapped wasn't dramatic. It was painfully simple. It happened while we both waited for the elevator after a late presentation review. The hallway was dim, tired. Half the office had already left. Mikhail leaned against the wall, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, looking more human than I had ever seen him. He said my name in a tone that wasn't professional anymore. It was soft, slow, personal. Sana, can I ask you something? I nodded, maintaining a safe distance because I felt instinctively that the next sentence he said would change something fundamental between us. He asked, when did you stop being loved the way you deserve? My breath actually trembled, not from his nearness, but from the accuracy. I should have stopped the conversation. I should have laughed it away. I should have said he was reading too much into my life. Instead I answered truthfully, I don't know, I think I just slowly disappeared. He took one step toward me. Just one. Not touching, not reaching, but closing the space enough that I felt warmth radiating from his body. He said, I see you. Those 3 words detonated inside me like confession and rescue at the same time. No one had said that to me in years. Irfan always saw what I did, not who I was. The elevator doors opened behind us. We didn't move. Neither of us entered. The metal doors closed again. Time paused like we were suspended between 2 choices. Finally he inhaled deeply, stepped back, and said we should both go home. There was restraint in his eyes. There was also longing, not physical hunger, but the desire to protect something fragile in me. He didn't reach for my hand. But it felt like emotional touch had already happened, and now my skin carried the imprint of a moment that hadn't been physical yet. Driving home, I couldn't unclench my jaw. Guilt sat heavy on my chest. The woman Irfan married believed in loyalty like religion. And here I was, replaying another man's voice telling me I was visible. When I walked into the house, Irfan was in the living room scrolling through his phone, TV loud, his entire attention swallowed by a screen. He didn't look up. He didn't ask how my day was. He just said dinner was cold. And something inside me finally broke in a quiet, irreversible way. I stood there and wondered, if 2 people inside a marriage both abandon the emotional bridge between them, who is the cheater? The one who leaves first, or the one who leaves silently long before the other even notices? That night I buried my face into my pillow and said the confession inside my head that I couldn't say aloud. I wish the man who wasn't my husband had been my husband. I knew I needed to choose a path. And for the first time since my wedding day, I wasn't sure if saving my marriage was still the moral choice. The final turning point came on a Friday morning, the kind of morning where everything looks ordinary from the outside, but history quietly rearranges itself underneath. I walked into the office prepared to avoid Mikhail, to create appropriate distance, to prove to myself that I could step back before anything irreversible happened. I rehearsed neutral sentences in the car. Good morning, here are the reports, have a great weekend. I planned emotional discipline like a strategy. But when I stepped inside the boardroom, I found out something that emptied my lungs. It was Mikhail's last day. He was moving to the Karachi office permanently starting Monday. The decision was finalized overnight. He saw my face freeze, and for a moment the air between us was thick with unspoken meaning. He didn't pull me aside. He didn't make it romantic. He simply said, maybe this is better for both of us. And I hated the correctness of that. Because it was the better path. The safer path. The moral path. But morality doesn't comfort a wound, it only instructs us how not to create deeper scars. We had one last meeting later that day. He thanked the department for the collaboration. He shook hands with everyone. When it was my turn, he held my hand 1 second longer than strict politeness required. Not inappropriate. Just acknowledging. He didn't ask me to leave my husband. He didn't ask to keep in touch. He didn't even ask for my number. He just said, quietly, don't let the part of you that I saw disappear again. Then he let go. When I reached home that evening, Irfan was in the kitchen calculating utility payments. I stood there for a long time, watching him, wondering what version of us could have existed if both of us had protected softness instead of taking each other for granted. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to confess the emotional disaster that almost happened. I wanted to tell him how lonely I had become inside a home that was supposed to be safe. But instead I asked him the simplest question in our marriage, are we okay? He looked surprised. He organized his receipts and said, yeah, why wouldn't we be? That answer told me everything. He didn't even know there was a crisis. He didn't even know there was an entire version of me he no longer spoke to. So I made a decision that wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. I chose to rebuild myself before I tried to rebuild my marriage. I took out my old watercolor set the next morning. I painted for 3 hours. I cried sometimes, but the colors made sense in a way my marriage hadn't for months. I did not cheat. I did not touch another man. But betrayal does not require the body. It requires the abandonment of self. And when I washed my brushes, I whispered, more as a prayer than a conclusion, he wasn't my husband. But he reminded me how a woman should be seen. And now, I will not vanish again.